I'm going to hand this next session over to our manager of branded media, Jaime Lara. He's going to be spending time with a champion in the state of New Jersey and across the Northeast. Craig Schlosser is the VP of Middlesex County's Regional Chamber of Commerce. He's the Vice Chair, Advisory Board member on New Jersey Small Business Development Center, has a front row seat for what's happening with the small business side as it relates to future of work. He was a former account manager and worked on the service side with Coca-Cola. I'm very excited to have Craig Schlosser here today with Jaime Lara.
So welcome everybody to our next one-on-one interview. I'm here joined with Craig Schlosser. Craig, great to have you here, man.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, sure. So, I feel like you're the best person to introduce yourself to our guests. So take it away, man.
My name is Craig Schlosser. I'm the Vice President with the Middlesex County Regional Chamber of Commerce. We're located right here in New Brunswick, New Jersey, right by Rutgers University and the corporate headquarters of Johnson & Johnson.
Oh, nice. I know exactly where that is then.
And that's, between J&J and Rutgers, most people are like, oh yeah, I know exactly where you are.
That exact.
Landmarks do so much. It's great, except when you're driving and you don't know the street names.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because that kind of brought me to what was top of mind when, I saw your background. We've been talking to a lot of people from in like a national scape and almost with a global viewpoint. But, a lot of people, I feel like, sort of more localized regional aspects, discussions of what the workforce needs in those regions is sort of getting overlooked because we're having all these really grand conversations about, a changing workforce. But I feel like you're at a very particular spot where you're sort of seeing local mom and pop shops, but then, being with Johnson & Johnson as well, big corporations also deciding to plant a flag and make a town their home. I guess, in general, what are your hopes for that kind of balance? How do you think that these two very different spectrums of working are going to change in the future? And what does that mean for, Middlesex County from your perspective?
First and foremost, I really appreciate you bringing up the question. I think it's absolutely excellent. There's two things you can see with it. J&J, having them across the street, they're just from a cultural perspective, working with them, especially with what we do with our Human Resources Summit that's SHRM accredited. And those of you that aren't familiar with SHRM, that's Society for Human Resources Management Professionals. And then there's also HRCI, which are the two main accrediting organizations when it comes to HR professionals. We run an accredited summit every year with Central New Jersey SHRM, and we've been very fortunate to have Johnson & Johnson support as either a keynote or a primary panelist with that. And I cannot tell you the great job that they do as an organization, engaging their employees, living their credo, and doing so many wonderful things. On the other side of the coin, I'm the vice chair for the Small Business Development Center at Rutgers. And what Elaine McLean does there is the regional director, and working with those small businesses to really help them be successful is just as important there as it is for Johnson & Johnson. Because if you don't have engaged employees, you don't empower them, you don't energize them. Prior to the chamber, I was with Coca-Cola. And you look at a company with another great culture there. But those three things, the empowerment, the energizing, the engagement, are things that we talked about at Coca-Cola, which I've seen every successful company be able to go ahead and deploy. So regardless of size, there's guiding principles, just like with a successful business and how you operate, that need to be utilized regardless of size, industry, or whatever it might be. So I think getting those principles executed properly and making it a real clear empowerment objective for the leadership of those organizations is essential to any company's success.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then how do you feel that, what do you feel like your role is in delivering those principles and creating those principles?
Well, I think as a chamber, it's important to recognize what you can and cannot do. You cannot be everything to everybody. The chamber has two main areas that we operate in, and that's connections and resources. Resources are anything that helps your business. That's like saying there's a wall behind me. It's very vague. Connections is really understanding that business and getting them to the right resources at the right time. Now, that is a lot harder than it sounds. When we do that, you get three things that happen. Businesses stay here, businesses grow here, and new businesses come. And that's economic development. And when you look at your membership, chambers are mainly self-funded 501c6s. We're a non-lobbying 501c6. So really a lot of our focus is on that resource component and connection. To us, it's about that engagement and understanding of the members, and then finding that supportive ecosystem that exists here for us to go ahead and leverage. Now, we can only utilize whatever resources are available in our ecosystem. So we're only as good as the resources around us. We're very fortunate here in central New Jersey to have such a strong supportive environment, especially in the workforce arena. We do very, very well with that. And a lot of credit to our workforce board that Kevin Kurtzell runs as the CEO, and just does a great job there. And also to Rutgers, the Middlesex County College. There's a lot of key educational partners here that make a difference every day.
Gotcha. Gotcha. That's amazing to hear. And so, looking forward then, I guess, at future of work trends, I mean, what do you feel like is missing right now in the conversation when we're discussing these future problems? And sort of what do you think needs to, I guess, preemptively change to address those issues?
So I think that's a really excellent question as we look at the future of work. And one thing comes down is the concept of credentialing. And what credentials are associated with is industry recognized certifications associated with a career path. Now, the idea of stackable credentials is really important. And that's something that we've done a pretty good job here in New Jersey and the region throughout, is understanding that you start somewhere, get a certification, and be able to build towards a greater educational objective to create a skilled workforce. What's also good about that is it creates that career path. And that gets that hybrid of what you've seen in terms of the new apprenticeship model, which is out there, which is so very important. I think, really working with the U.S. Department of Labor on apprenticeship programs, they're very adaptable to creating new apprenticeship pathways or modifying existing ones to work with you. And that's something I've been really impressed with, by the flexibility to do those things to help people be able to move forward in their career path. Because what we're seeing is, especially for smaller employers, you're getting individuals that are coming in, they're getting developed, and then they're moving on to something a little bit bigger. The credentials are important because it says that that person has a basic competency in those areas and that their skill set is defined enough, along with the made, saved, and achieved accomplishments that are on someone's resume.
Got it.
So from a chamber perspective, one area that we've really been able to do it, and credit to your CEO, Sam, for this, is Sam was fantastic in working with us in an innovative program. We have the One Huddle application that we're able to work with our members, get that out to them, allow them to get in the concept of gamification, start to build their capabilities and their skills, tied in with our virtual programs that we do for our Open for Business Growth and Development series that are focused on what we would call, when I was at Coca-Cola, or as many HR folks will call it, capability building.
So really just looking outside of what's on this certificate from some Ivy League school, God forbid, or some other program, to really just expanding what is accepted, right?
And
is that what you're saying?
Yes, and I think being able to expand upon that and make the position, company-specific training is important as much as industry-specific training is important. That's where you see the two different components of it. What's good about the application is you can use it for company-specific. Their credentials are industry-specific. That allows you, for some positions, need a college education, some do not, some need a combination. But one thing that I think we all have learned to embrace and adapt here is that lifelong learning concept. That's no longer just a philosophical conversation. That is now the norm. I mean, if you and I talked about the amount of things that we learned over the past 90 days in terms of technology, it is absolutely absurd. But it's the ability for individuals to continually adapt and learn. But from a company perspective, what we need to do is create those applications and that learning for individuals so they don't have to go hunt that on their own. People want to get better, but a company can create the structure and direct their individuals in the right area for their company.
Absolutely. And that actually flows perfectly into my next question, which is sort of what skills do you think either that people are pursuing to learn on their own or that companies are telling their employees to look more into or to upskill themselves at? What skills do you think are being overvalued, or which other skills are ignored? And just in general, how does that change the nature of work, the nature of jobs from your perspective?
So I was reading an article the other day, and I think this is a really good question, is so often in today's society, we look at how many tasks did you accomplish today? You did 100 tasks, good job. But did those tasks really help you move forward towards your strategic business objective? And if the answer is no, then you're not really able to move forward the way you need to. And I think one thing that's often forgotten about is the concept of deep thought. And if you're not able to go ahead and really have someone that can look at a strategic problem, understand it, and then come up with an innovative solution, that's really the differentiation that I think too often is missed. And that's a soft skill. So as I look at things with it, technical hard skills can be taught, but the right mindset and the right approach, that's something that's an intangible asset that can be developed and grown but I think it's one thing that we really have to look at from a cultural perspective within a company to nurture, and also from an educational system, encourage that type of thought process development and confidence in individuals that they know how to communicate that effectively to their senior leaders when they first enter the workforce.
Do you see that kind of conflict, I guess, between an intangible soft skill versus like raw data? I mean, that's been a conflict that's been around in the workplace since industrialization. How do you think technology, automation, robots, do you think that makes that process more complicated, easier?
I think it's how you approach it. And I think it's the mindset that matters. And regardless of what those challenges or opportunities might be, it's how you approach that specific scenario is what matters. How you communicate and collaborate with your team is what matters. And that's where the culture of your organization is so essential. I was reading a great article the other day that came off of Angels List. It was off of their select reading. And those of you that get the newsletter will probably have seen about 2 weeks ago, where it talks about your company's culture is your competitive advantage. So in this scenario, when a question like that comes up, I think your company's culture will really allow you to answer that question effectively. I know from the members I work with and what we have here at the chamber, we look at it as, okay, let's come up with an innovative solution that's going to help us meet the market need, that's going to help us service our community and our members and provide value to drive us forward. That's where we're going to start. We're not going to look at what tool or where the data is on that. We see an opportunity. We understand there's a challenge out there that we can turn into an opportunity. Now let's go build our case to make sure we do that. Instead of looking data first, I think it's looking at the bigger picture first is the way that we would approach it.
Gotcha. And that's sort of regardless of technological advancements, automation, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, there's a great article that came out about how, business owners see opportunity and they're positive, even with everything that's going on with the world right now, in the next 6 to 12 months based on what they're seeing. Now, that's great. And that's data that proves it. But could I also tell you from conversations I'm having that, yes. So from a chamber perspective to this conversation on the future of work, what can we do to position companies that have the right people in the right positions with the right resources to take advantages of those opportunities and accelerate their growth? That's how we would look at that data. Got
it. That's excellent to hear. And moving on to my next question then, again, going back to, you being in Chamber of Commerce for a county, again, a very specific position. One foot is almost like in the trenches, with business owners and business owners. The other is sort of like a, eye in the sky kind of macro perspective. And especially your work with Rutgers, the relationship between how both federal and state policy affects your work sphere, and then how education from a K through 12 to a collegiate standpoint like Rutgers, how all of that intersects and affects just labor, just work, just jobs at the end of the day. I mean, what do you see from both of those ends really changing over the next 10, 15 years or so? And how is that going to impact the work you're doing and the people you're advocating for, you think?
Well, I think there's a lot of ways to look at it. I think it's an excellent question because there's a couple things. First and foremost, we operate within the ecosystem we're given. So whatever that we have to work with, we're going to work with, and we're happy to have it. So the workforce board that I mentioned earlier does a great job with Kevin Kerslow's team. And I worked with them for years, the one-stop operator. Now I'm a board member for the Workforce Development Board here in Middlesex. And from a federal component, there's what's called WIO, which is the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. That really drives your workforce board, and that's your federal component of it. It's got some really good components to it. One thing is there's a youth program component where interns are able to come in and work at different companies and gain different skills. We have one here at the chamber. Young man's fantastic. Chris does a great job for us. We're teaching him Salesforce. If you go online and look at Salesforce right now, I learned it 10, 12 years ago. It's a fantastic application, but it is a lot to learn. Well, there's a great program in there called Skill Up that the county has where you can take free industry recognized credential courses and then get your Salesforce certification. On top of that, what I look at, then we take a platform like we have with One Huddle, we can teach him company specific training or help develop certain soft skills that we couldn't do there. So again, we're looking at industry, we're looking at a workforce program that's bringing us a talented individual, and we're helping him develop his soft skills here within the chamber. That's a holistic workforce development program. And I think the more we can get towards those holistic programs that are taking educational institutions, partnering them up with community organizations to help people move forward, the more successful we can be. So I think an understanding of the classroom is very important in creating the hard skills. The thought process associated with that to learn during those skills to allow for lifelong learning and evolution, continually allowing those that want to move forward and enhance their skills, we need to continue to find a way to do that. And that's what certifications are important, because even if you have your bachelor's, your master's, or your PhD, we have two entirely different worlds here in Middlesex. We have a large amount of healthcare positions, and then we have a lot of manufacturing and logistics jobs, the most in the entire state per county in manufacturing, which are two entirely separate endeavors.
Yeah.
So when you look at it, you have both sides, and then we have education with Rutgers.
So since you've brought up again the sort of the two fronts you're working with, very stark differences, I guess, like, what are the challenges you think you face, or you feel you face, in trying to deal with those two separate worlds? And I guess then, since they are different spheres, what are the challenges you feel these institutions are facing from government, from education, from, the impending changing nature of work?
Well, I think a lot of times when you look at it from your government partners, it's an understanding of what they can and can't do. And from your private sector partners, it's understanding what they can and can't do. Taking a look at those and then really trying to put them together in the optimal situation to get the best possible outcome for what you feel is the workforce needs and what companies needs. The most important part of any company is their people, which is one area why we put such a focus here at the Chamber. We have an Emerging Leaders Summit. We have a Women's Leadership Summit. We have an HR Summit. We go really in depth into developing people on a capability level within the mentorship that we offer. And one reason why we ever open for business growth and development programs, because it's about people. If we develop people, they can be successful. So if we leverage all of those different components that we have and allowed for us to be that connector to get that aha moment, that's what we can do. We're not going to come and put together a groundbreaking component or program on something. That's a limitation of being a self-funded 501c6. That's not our purpose. We're connected and we work with resources. That goes back to my conversation earlier. We are only as good as the ecosystem we support. We can drive engagement, we can get people involved, we can bring them to the table, but ultimately those change agents have to decide to drive it forward on themselves.
I see,
and I'm seeing a lot of that stuff starting to come. It's also a realization that government and private sector move at two different speeds. So as we continue to move forward with that, those building that understanding, building those coalitions, I think is essential to success.
Yeah, and that's sort of regardless of whether it's a big corporate enterprise or the small mom and pop shop, right? Just those basic principles.
Yeah, because if we find principles, I always look at it this way: if we have philosophical alignment, we have common ground. Think about any partnership. You want to have a mutually beneficial opportunity. By creating a baseline and an understanding of what it is, why it's important, and what you're working together towards, and how each one of you have a positive stake in this and your role in it, you can be successful. That's really what our job is with that, is in helping bring that together and be that consensus builder.
Yeah. And do you see that focus ever changing at any point, as long as work is going to be a thing?
I've been working with Chambers of Commerce doing workforce development since 2016. So I've been in it 14 years. And I've also, as I mentioned before, I've been in as a volunteer. I've also been involved as a full-time, professional nonprofit executive. To me, I don't see that changing, because chambers have always been a conduit of connections. But recognition that we can only work within the ecosystem we have, and we need to continue to find new partners. A lot of my role is, hey, there's an opportunity. Let's find a partner that can help make this happen. How can we be innovative? How can we use technology to break down boundaries, but also make things more personable? And it's an understanding that the tool isn't the solution. The strategy is what's going to allow us to be successful. And as long as we're looking at it from a strategic, not a tactical perspective, and a holistic endeavor, I think we can be very successful. It's when you get so into the weeds on something, I think that's when we lose our effectiveness, because we lose our ability to be that bigger picture strategic connector that provides value.
Yeah. Again, as you said, like, that's kind of them as a change driver is on whatever business, whatever company is to do that. Looking back at the sort of ecosystem you work with, what do you feel like is the biggest factor in volatility or changing that ecosystem? Is it technology? Because at least that's where my mind jumps to first.
I think with the ecosystem, I think it's, as we look at it, it's what what companies feel that they need, and it's what job seekers feel that they need. And then deciding what mechanisms can be used to help bridge that gap.
Mm,
So
interesting.
you look at a lot of the components right now in regards to the value of a college education versus not the value of the college education, the certifications versus, versus any other component. You look at it from a non-industry recognized credential. There's back and forth regardless of which side you're on.
Hmm.
And I think one of the most important things to me within that is always finding a way to bridge those two gaps together to allow them to be successful. And if we can find a way to do that through technology, that's great. If it's through programs, awesome. Those are things that really are so important for us to bridge. So two things that I always look at is, okay, we need to have an idea of the open jobs, what industries they're in, where they're located, and then we need to give people tools to get better. So if they want to get education counseling to help them get a college degree, let's go for it. The number one number that always probably stuck out in my head in the latest State Employment and Training Commission report for the state of New Jersey is 21% of the workforce has some college education but no degree. Only 7% of the workforce has an associate's degree. So there's obviously a big disconnect there from getting college to that completion there. So that's where I think when you look at STEP credentials, that's important, because if you're getting people credentials while they're on their way to their college degree or getting them a certification, you're creating some type of educational distinction for them to have a higher earning or some type of career path. The worst part is, hey, I have 45 credits, or I have 115 credits, but I have no degree. Well, you're still close, but you don't have it. But if you were advised early on to get a credential that allows you to stack with that, going from a certification to an associate's degree to a bachelor's degree, no matter what happens when life happens, you have a chance to be more successful. And I think that's where education can be helpful. That's where organizations like the Chamber can be helpful in creating education here. And that's where companies can be helpful in developing people for a career path, regardless of their size.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, we're at about 4:30 perfectly. So thanks again so much, Craig. It was really fascinating to hear, your thoughts on this perspective. And again, I truly think that this is a very unique position amongst a lot of speakers we've had that you're in. And I think it's really amazing what you guys are doing.
My pleasure.